Cool. Okay. Well, thank you very much for having me and for bearing with me. So thank you to Finns for having me speak. This feels a little bit different after these kind of like massive international subjects, and then we're going to talk about this tiny little red barn in the middle of a field now. But yeah, I'm going to talk about a case study on our house again, and just our kind of next steps from getting the house finished it 3.5 years ago, and then trying to get more resilient. I did this in 19 minutes and 19 seconds last night, so I will do my very best to stick to time, basically. For those that don't know me, I'm Joe. I'm an architect. I'm a passive house designer. I'm a Homestar assessor. Homestar is good. I'm a dad. I'm a Yorkshireman. There are some dry graphs in here, so it's probably going to be interjected with some really bad humour at some point. I also had to rewrite a lot of this last night because some of the presentations yesterday actually covered a lot of what I was going to kind of talk about, and I needed to make sure it was right. So bear with me. So yes, this is our little house. This is Lower Saddle Passive House. I designed it, helped build it, and finished it in 2021. Passive House certified, Passive House Classic, Homestar version type, 10-star rated. It's my very patient wife. I apologise to her, but it's been my incredible chance to use this to test, explore, experiment, and kind of see how we can do better buildings for lower cost and what that actually means, and does it really work, basically. It's been great for lecturing, for tours, all sorts of bits and pieces. It's in the warm temperate climate zone, about 50 minutes north of Auckland, on a beautiful little field in the middle of nowhere, if anybody fancies a trip. It's only got 150mm SIP walls, a 250mm SIP roof, a 240mm suspended timber floor. Doesn't have extreme insulation, anything like that. It's just, as Sarah's presentation was this morning, just good design. You don't need to elevate everything if you're thinking about it first up front, basically. The point of the project was to strip everything back to the main principles. I know some people don't like the word principles, but what are our principles or priorities we want to achieve to bring down the upfront cost? So it's all well and good saying that this is going to have low operating costs. If you can't afford to do it, you can't afford to do it, basically. So how are we going to do it? How are we going to make it achievable in our limited budget? We did things ourselves. We designed every space to what we needed to live. So we didn't say, here's a 200-meter squared footprint. We said, we want our bedroom to be 3x3, for example. Health, performance, and also planning for the future came first, balanced with a little bit of beauty. And all of the nice to haves came later, basically. We still haven't finished the driveway. I still haven't finished the kitchen, but it's warm and dry. One of the drawers has started sticking, but it's fine. And we completed it in 2021 at 2,600 square meter, so less than the minimum code building at the time. Over the past 3.5 years, I've been monitoring the hell out of it. It's performed basically as it says on the tin. We barely need any heater. We've got a little $15 fan heater from Bunnings for the couple of days in winter. During summer, it does get a little bit uncomfortable for like a week. So we're looking at potentially a dehumidifier or something like that to take the edge off. But other than that, it's been great. The house is all electric. It's very, very cheap to run. The bills are only about $150 a month. It uses an average of 37 kilowatt hours per meter squared per year. In PHBP, it said it was going to use 38. So pretty good. Low bills year round. When I originally designed the project, I said, right, we're going to have PV at some point. So let's make sure we've got room for it in the DB board sort of thing. But $150 a month, that kind of started slipping down the list quite quickly, basically. So why the hell am I talking about it? Why would we bother? First of all, energy costs, energy resilience. Costs are only going to go up. They're going to continue to go up. Even in the past few months, we've seen short power supply shortages, cost increases, as our population grows, as the demand, as we saw in some of the presentations yesterday, demand is only going to go up, and fossil fuels are running low. This is only going to get worse. So I'm trying to kind of plan for the future, look ahead, spend money now to kind of save money later, hopefully. Next one is climate resilience. This was the road out of our house in January 2023, after that nice little cyclone. Once we got past the tree, we got to that. And then we turned around and went the other way and we got to that. So yeah, we were stuck in our house for 5 days. We had no power. There was no cell phone signal because all the towers were down. We're on tank water, so we had no running water. We couldn't get out. It's terrifying. And I mean, I grew up in the middle of the Yorkshire Dales. We got snowed in summers, so in winters. Sorry, well, basically summers, but winters. So yeah, I'm used to isolation, but this was different. It was really different. So And we even made the news. So that big long brown smear used to be a hillside. That's our main road and the railway line from Whangarei going down. That's our little house just there. So yeah, and you can see all the different slips on the hills around. So it was a little bit, yeah. And we got off lightly. You know, you look at other areas of the country, they were pretty buggered basically. So all electric is really good until you can't get any electricity, basically. No water, no heating. So this energy resilience suddenly flew right up our list. You know, how are we going to manage this? It became a priority as opposed to a nice to have. So we started thinking, how are we going to do this? Should we just buy a generator, a diesel generator? But then, you know, when the fuel's gone, the fuel's gone. Depends how long you're going to be there. Could we look at wind generation? Could we put the kids on a bike or something like that? Probably all unrealistic. So we got back to solar in the end. So first, where are we? Okay, be quick. First decisions, 3 different types. What type of system do you want? You got grid tied. It's just the panels and the inverter. It's the cheapest sort of system, but you won't have power at night. You won't have power during a power cut. So not very resilient, basically. The next one is a grid type hybrid. That basically is the same thing, but you add a battery. That means you can store the power you don't use. It means you're going to have power at night, power during the power cuts and all sorts of things. So that's definitely more resilient. Third one is off grid, much more expensive, lots more batteries, lots more panels. Jason did a great article recently on why off grid probably isn't the best decision unless you can't get power, in which case then you should probably explore that one. God, I went down the minefield of how many different panel types, inverter types, microinverters, sizes, batteries, all sorts of things. So there's lots of different things you can dive into, but they're the 3 main types you can get. But the problem is cost, upfront cost. The grid type hybrid was definitely the best one for us, but the battery was at least 50 to 7% of the cost. You know, we're talking $25,000 for a Tesla Powerwall, 15 grand for some batteries down there. We couldn't meet that cost basically. So I took a step back, like with the house, and I thought, right, what do we want to do? What is the end goal? How are we going to get there? What if we just bought the panels now, started paying those off, and then we could afford a battery at a later date? So we went ahead with that sort of methodology. So use PHPP to size the system. How many panels do we need? Where does it need to be? Orientation, angles, you know, exploring all these bits and pieces to see how many panels were needed, basically. And then place that against the PER standard to see, basically Passive House Plus is providing the same amount of energy that you use on site. So if you're meeting that, then you should be fine. So we saw we were well within the Passive House Plus requirements. I've also been monitoring the house for the past 3.5 years, so we could see how much power we've actually been using, an average of just over 4,500 kilowatt hours per year. And then we went to some suppliers, ended up going with Lightforce, and they helped us see that what PHPP had said basically did work. But we wanted to add a little bit of extra in there for future proofing. You know, did we want a sauna, Olympic-sized swimming pool, anything like that? Oversize it, basically. So 12 panels, that's what we wanted in the end. Next question is, where are we going to put them? Rooftop solar is great. It really is, if you don't have room. But there are some issues with it, basically. First of all, I'm an architect. I don't want to put holes in my roof. It's not a good thing. Second of all, panels need to be cleaned. We live next to dirt roads. We've got lots of pollen. You need to hose them down every now and then. I'm not going to climb up my 30-degree roof in the middle of the summer to try and clean these things. So ongoing maintenance is going to be an issue as well. Next one is temperature. Panels work better. PV panels work better when they're colder. If you're putting them on a hot metal roof in the summer, that can get to 90 degrees. Your efficiency is going to drop quite significantly. So it's going to be an impact on the overall generation. And then there's the angle and orientation of the roof. You're dictated by which way it faces. We do have 2 30-degree roofs, but they face east and west, so that's not ideal. We do have some north-facing roof, but it's only 5 degrees. So we would have had to put them on like angles and all sorts of things. And I didn't want black panels on my nice red building, basically. So when we're talking about angle, as we heard yesterday, if the sun is hitting the panels directly, that is where they're going to be generating most. So north-facing if you can. But then the angle will depend on a couple of different factors. First of all, there's the latitude. So depending where you are in the country will depend on the angle, but also the generation. Do you want to tilt them more so you get more power in winter when you get less solar hours? So thinking about all these different factors when you're positioning the system. So we went with ground mount in the end. We had a nice, perfect 30-degree slope, north-facing, very unshading during the year. I don't know if this video is going to work or not, but they use modeling. There it is. Nice little ArchiCAD model to see, is it going to be getting the solar hours that I wanted during the day and all sorts of things. So yeah, my methodology is thinking it through as much as physically possible and losing lots of hours sleep, making sure it's the right decision. So we decided it was, there we go. So it's about 35 meters from the house, so there was trenching to consider. Thankfully, there wasn't significant drop in the power over that sort of distance. So again, that shouldn't be too much of an issue. So we started thinking, right, what are we going to put this on? You can get to all sorts of clever racks that kind of follow the sun and all sorts of bits and pieces, and more durable metal ones, but we wanted to try and keep the upfront cost down. So a simple timber rack that I designed, and 30 degrees. For compliance, you have to get it checked by a chartered engineer. They, of course, doubled the amount of flipping timber in it. So the cost went up quite a lot. But, you know, running through options, different timber sizes, spacings, all sorts of things, trying to keep the cost down as much as possible. We did listen to them because we didn't want the panels flying off. But yeah, so eventually we decided the design. And again, we spread the costs. We built it over about 5 or 6 weeks. I bought, you know, the posts 1 week, the framing the next week, the fixings the next week, sort of thing. The whole thing came to just over 3 grand in the end. And I quite like it for some reason. So Lightforce came in on the 7th of March and installed some nice solar panels in the pissing rain. A little bit ironic in a way. The system was just over 30, well, nearly 14 grand for the whole system. This was only, what, 5 or 6 months ago. They already have a cheaper system advertised, which is a little bit frustrating, but it just kind of shows how quickly the technology and the price is moving. You can get 14 panels and a 6 kilowatt inverter for the same price. For the rest of the kit, so you got the inverter on the inside. We designed a suspended timber floor for thermal performance, but also it means you can access the services easier. So rather than hacking up a concrete slab, we just put it in and underneath. All our linings are plywood, so all we had to do was take a sheet off, put it in, put it back up. Didn't have to do any repainting or anything like that. So it literally took about half an hour to install the whole thing, which is great. Some little thoughts. So it definitely cost us more. So if we put it on the roof, we wouldn't have had the cost of the rack because it's all wrapped into the install cost. But my hope is we'll have the long-term durability gains. I'm not very good at maintaining things, if I'm perfectly honest. So if it's easier, it's better as far as I'm concerned. Cool. So how am I doing for time? I'll be quick. Right, okay, be very quick. So did it work? Yes, our power bills went from 150 a month to about 50 odd a month straight away, which is fantastic. And this is shoulder season as well, so this isn't peak generation. That was great until one of our poor cars died. We were running 2 20-year-old petrol cars. So we thought, right, if we've got to buy a new one, let's replace it with an EV. So we spent $18,500 on our new little Nissan Leaf. We call the kid's name Cinder, because it's black, I believe. So of course our nice power bills that had dropped down to nearly $50 smashed right on back up again, which is really depressing to see. But quite anal about things, so we record all our spending and all sorts of bits and pieces. So I've got the data for 3 years of fuel spending as well. Our petrol bills a month are bloody scary, or were bloody scary. So we were spending over $800 a month on fuel. Straight away, we're getting the EV. We're paying for 1 petrol car and the Rux for the EV. We're saving $470 a month just by making that change on the fuel. Once you add the power back in again, we're still saving over $400 a month just by doing those things, basically. So it works, and we commute over 90 kilometers a day, so that works pretty well. How do we afford it? So the upfront cost. So the EV, we got a 1% loan with the bank, so there was 0 upfront cost for that. For the panels, we got I'm not a finance person, don't listen to me, but we got a 2-year interest-free loan for the panels. So there was $50 upfront cost. We just put in a little bit away a week, so by the time that period comes up, we can pay it off, and we're getting some interest in the meantime. So just trying to think about the structures. If we could have this sort of thing for a better house, that would be pretty cool as well. So for the PHPP geeks, did it work? Was it right? It underestimates the generation from what we've been recording so far. I think Jonathan Holmes down in Monaco's found the same thing. But we are well within the requirements of Passive House Plus. We haven't got the cash for the recertification, but I might see if I can bribe Jason at some point, hopefully. Yeah, I'll get sorted. I'll do that. So the system's a 5.1 kilowatt system with a 5 kilowatt inverter. Clear day, fantastic. March, over 35 kilowatt hours generated. When it's a bit cloudy, not so good maybe, but we only use 12 to 14 kilowatts in the house during the day, so we're still generating nearly 20. So definitely generating more, and this is in autumn and winter. We generated over 3,000 kilowatts in the past 6 months. Yeah, been going really well until we got the EV. And then, of course, that smashed out our balance. So we've bought more than we've used. And we're waiting for summer to see how that works with the timings. But the biggest problem is peak demand versus peak supply at the end of the day. In winter, we had to leave the house at 6 in the morning. So we were showering before we left. And then we got home when the sun went down. So we were cooking after that. So it meant that all this nice free energy was getting sold back to the grid at basically half of what we would then have to pay to buy it back again, which was pretty frustrating. Since we've got the EV, we charge that overnight, and that's even more of a problem, basically, as you can see. So ideally, we need some kind of storage. We need some kind of battery to take this free power and look after it. But batteries are expensive. We're not going to have the money for that at any point. But we've already got one. We've already got one on site. Our nice little Cinder, our car. So this is kind of just a point about thinking outside the box and thinking about how else we could do things. EVs in other countries already do this. It has come to New Zealand. You can use it as your house battery overnight, basically. So you've got vehicle to grid, vehicle to house. So it's going to be a little bit interesting because obviously we charge our car at night. How can you use it for the house at the same time? So we need to work through those problems, but we only use about 3 kilowatts overnight. And the battery for the car is 39 kilowatts. So even if we charge it to a certain time and then use some power back, our other car, Chloe, is pretty much on a deathbed. So when we replace that one, do we get another EV, charge one overnight, and vice versa sort of thing? So just thinking about how we can plan this to make it work for the family, basically. I was going to talk about embodied carbon, but it's complicated, and Jason's already done it really well. So have a look at the article about that. Essentially, yes, PV takes more embodied energy to create, but it's getting better. I heard a story about a PV factory made the panels, and then the panels they made then generate the energy for the next panels. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So yeah, they're getting better. And then there is the carbon kind of tunnel vision. Yes, things take carbon, and absolutely it is. We had Lloyd's fantastic presentation yesterday about it's the carbon now we've got to care about, but there's the other things. There is the resilience, the comfort, the health of having that generation on site. So yeah, it's a complicated picture, but this is working well for us. And yeah, it's been really useful to use it as a learning tool. So if anybody ever wants to come and see Little Lower Saddle, feel free. I think I'm probably over time, so a little plug. I've started my own company, Well Architecture. I still kind of consult or respond. But the point of this is to enable me to do more advocacy and collaborate with all of you wonderful people on better projects and just getting buildings to be better in New Zealand. So if you want to chat, let me know. And then final thoughts. Can anyone afford it? Yeah, you probably can, actually. It doesn't necessarily require a big upfront cost if you think about the structures that are available to kind of reduce that. And then think about what you need. Do you need a battery now? Can you get away with just having panels? End of the day, because we had a passive house, we only needed a very small system. It was only a 5 kilowatt system. My friend who's down the road has got double the amount of panels, and it still doesn't quite cover his energy cost for his house. So efficiency first, reduces the amount of materials you need to use. Ground mounts are really good if you've got room, but roof still works as well. Just think about a building. If you're designing from scratch, what's the orientation of the roof? Where could you put the panels? Is solar PV worth it? I think so. Add an electric car and it helps even more. Did we create a more resilient house? No, we didn't, because we couldn't afford the battery. But we're taking the buses, we're not going straight there. We're trying to find the routes to get us to the end goal eventually. So I'm really sorry if I went over time, but thank you very much for listening. I hope that was interesting.